Hey, Fearless Schools podcast listening audience. Thanks for joining us on yet another delightful podcast experience. Today, it's your host, Dr. Drew Tomlin, sweeping off the front porch of this humble educational home to you to let you all in. Step up the front porch and sit on a comfy chair with the sun at your face and open up those ears for another thrilling session brought to you by the band of unflappable pedagogical thought giants at Creative Leadership Solutions. Not only am I here with, 30 plus years of educational experience as a teacher and current school administrator, but we've also got someone in the house with a treasure trove of insights, and that is CLS Director of Professional Learning, Dr. Ann McCarty. What's going on, Dr. Ann?
Drew, today is a twofer.
That's true. That is true.
We get two amazing educators.
Right.
For one.
No coupon necessary.
No coupon necessary. I'm super excited. I'm a big fan of the literature, the discussion, and I'm excited. I can't wait.
Me too. I am thrilled, and I'm just ready to go. So, today's podcast, like you just alluded to, it's going to inspire folks because it's about the power of the collective. All right, so we're about to learn from not one, not three, but two amazing people, two educational heroes who decided to join forces and superpowers, and the world is a better place for it. Dare I say, not just this podcast is better off, but the whole darn globe and perhaps the galaxy? Maybe that's a better place too. I think so. Dare I say it? Yes, I just dared. All right, so who are these wonderful souls on today's podcast? Glad you asked. So let's begin with their individual resumes, their curriculum vitae, if you will. So one of these heroes is a Brooklyn-based educator and part-time Pokemon trainer. I can't wait to learn more about that. He works with teachers, school leaders, and leaders of community-based organizations to support equitable literacy reform in cities and sometimes villages across the globe. His latest book, I Know It, oh my gosh, it's called We Got This, explores how the work of creating more equitable school spaces is embedded in our everyday choices, specifically in the choice to really listen to kids. And that sings to my heart. The other hero with us, of course, is an inclusive educator who is deeply involved in local inquiry-based teacher research and school community development, alongside partnerships with the Teachers College Inclusive Classrooms Project and the New York City Department of Education since 2005. She has worked as a teacher, staff developer, adjunct professor, speaker, and documentarian. She has contributed content to the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy, Edutopia, Heinemann Education blog, inclusiveclassrooms.org, and has been featured in KQED, My Shift Parents Magazine, Teaching Tolerance Magazine, and the critically acclaimed New York Times serial podcast, Nice White Parents. Oh my gosh, I'm breathless. Together, they didn't just stop there on their individual accolades. They created a powerful superforce called the Minor Collective, right? It's a community-based movement both on the ground and virtual, and it's led by them in partnership with kids, families, teachers, and school leaders. Here's what they believe, right? The Minor Collective believes the greatest catalyst for sustainable change within a school community is driven from its heart, and that is the classroom community. A skilled teacher who centers their praxis in student-driven instruction is the most important pathway for creating shifts that lead to sustainable, equitable change. A pathway that underscores a liberated education for all people. Oh my gosh, they work to connect the dots within the ecosystem of school to enable community access and participation. Hey, everybody, we've got sunshine on a cloudy day. It's the two, not just the one, the two and only Kass and Cornelius Minor. Oh my gosh, how's it going?
Hey.
It's so great to be with y'all.
Yeah, Dr. Drew and Ann, thank you both so much for having us. Dr. Ann, we're already fans of you. Dr. Drew, thank you for having us. This is really great.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, I got to take a break, I think, just from reading the resume. You guys are do you guys have any rest time built into your lives? Goodness gracious, you do so much. Oh,
well, rest is one of those things we are actively intertwining into our schedule, and it takes some real intention because it's very easy, to just keep doing all the things.
Yeah, but we're big believers that rest is part of the resistance. So we gotta rest up so we can stay vigilant. Yeah,
there you go. Rest is part of the resistance. That's already a wonderful phrase. I'm going to keep that in my back pocket, especially if I want to tell somebody I need a nap. I'm resisting. So to get us warm up, in addition to naps and rest and everything like that, food, of course, is an important thing. So listen, what's your go-to food in times of educational challenge or educational triumph?
Oh man, Cornelius and I would not identify as foodies in any kind of way.
Okay.
We are like people who eat to survive. But for me, it's not necessarily food, but coffee. I know that sounds like a very like stereotypical kind of answer, but I literally cannot function without my morning coffee. I like it straight up black. I don't like anything in my coffee.
Really?
And, depending on the level of challenge we're engaging in, I was just at a friend's house. She had a brand new espresso maker, and we tried a shot in the dark. Y'all know what that is?
Mm-mm.
Like a shot of espresso and a cup of black coffee.
Oh. Yeah. So Anne's giving that the thumbs up. So
100%.
What happens to you when
I have a very, very high tolerance for caffeine.
Okay.
I will say for folks who are listening, I have a cutoff at 12 p.m. So no coffee after 12.
Okay.
But a lot of coffee before.
Okay.
And if you go to the coffee shop and the first time you do it and you're like, I need 3 shots of espresso in my cup of coffee, they kind of tilt their head to process it. And they're like, do you want an Americano? And I'm like, no. I really want the coffee with the extra shots of espresso.
Right. That if they drank coffee on mercury, that's what they would have.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Oh my
goodness. And honestly, Dr. Ann, I feel like depending on where you're at in the country, if you come to New York, we go to nobody blinks.
Yeah.
Nobody blinks at the level of an espresso you are requesting. It's wild.
Oh my gosh. All right. So we got coffee. And are you a mug person? Are you a paper cup person, or is it just whatever vessel is available?
I'm very picky about the vessel.
Yep.
So New York, we're traveling to different schools. Everything's in my backpack.
Mm-hmm.
It took one iPad to get ruined by a funky thermos. And then Cornelius, being the great partner that he is, did all this research. And now I have a Japanese Kento thermos.
Ooh.
And it's you can literally shake it upside down, whatever, throw it in your bag, and it is virtually leak proof.
That is awesome.
So the vessel is very important to me. I'm glad you asked.
Of course. I mean, we get to the deep stuff here on the Fearless Schools Pod. We're not afraid of any question. So, all right. So Kass has got the coffee. Cornelius, what's your jive?
And I'm the exact opposite of Kass. I do not drink coffee at all.
Oh wow.
Yeah, not one drop. And so my go-to meal, period, and this is in times of challenge, in times of triumph, in times of tragedy, my go-to meal is rice and beans. I like most of the planet. Every culture on the planet eats rice.
Mm-hmm.
I am Liberian. I'm West African, and I grew up in a family where rice was just right underneath the kids in terms of order of importance. I think from my mother, it might have been children rice, and then maybe my dad a distant third. But yeah, rice and beans has become my comfort food, primarily because I think it's Kass's best recipe. And so whenever
that's lovely.
Kass makes rice and beans, I'm the first one at the table, no matter what I'm doing.
Wow, that's lovely.
It's so funny. I have children too. Their favorite foods are lentils, and then his favorite food is rice and beans. So our grocery bill is so minimized. Nobody cooks anything there's no steak involved in our house. It's literally the cheapest food you could ever purchase.
Yeah.
So, but
that's cool.
Delicious. Yeah.
But there's something about it that I think for me, it's the vibe. It's not just, I can't even recall how it tastes, but I can recall how it makes me feel.
Right.
Just having everybody at the table, usually the kids are buzzing whenever there's rice and beans, everybody's smiling.
Yes.
And so just the vibe when and our oldest kid, when she gets off the elevator, our elevator is probably 20 meters from our front door. And so she'll get off the elevator and she'll smell rice and beans and she'll hit the door and she's just happy, and it's that's what I love.
Yeah. It almost goes to the whole heart of the Minor Collective in your work is rice and beans represent to you a full sensory community experience.
Yeah.
It's not just something that you eat to deal with hunger, but it actually feeds a whole different part of who you are and continues to do that. That's super cool.
Yeah.
You know what? And rice is a powerful grain. So there are grains of truth in everything that you're saying. So we want to go back now to Lil Kass and little Cornelius. So when you were students, right, your origin story. So you're educational superheroes. Every superhero has an origin story. So you got your capes on, you're flying around the world doing all this great work. So what's your origin story? What kind of students were you, and what, and perhaps even who helped you learn those early times in the schoolhouse? Did somebody just, reach out to you and say this? What was the story?
It's so funny, I feel like we do a lot of this kind of reflection in our work, this idea of like, in order to look forward, you got to look back. And I'm always thinking about with my student teachers that I work with, like our biggest goal is to support them in becoming like reflective practitioners. I feel like if we could do that as an edu people, we'll be much better off.
Yes.
But I think I have kind of like an anti-hero story in that I grew up in the military family. And so for me, I went to like, 6 different schools. I was always like the new kid. And I felt a great amount of, not being part of like the in crowd, which I think really influenced me as, who I am, like as an inclusive educator. What does it really mean when we say like access for all, communities of all learners, like outside the scope of like, including academics, but also outside the scope of academics, right? Like this needs to belong. This needs to feel like you matter and like you're important in this something you belong to.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, I don't have like many memorable teachers, to be honest with you, because I was never in any one place for that long. And so when I think about teachers who were most impactful in my life, mostly like my grandmothers, people who I had like this deep relational connection to, who weren't necessarily like mired in, sort of like the lockstep tradition of education, but rather I really got to spend a lot of like close proximity, close time with, and they would scoop me in and just let me be with them. And I learned so much from just like being in close proximity in those spaces. And so I think about, all the things of who I am, whether it be like, the mother, the wife, the partner, the person who's cooking rights and beans, or the person who's like facilitating a group of young teachers and in the beginning journey of their teacherhood. I think it really comes from such, I know a lot of theory too, but like the how to be part, like really comes from like these elders in my family.
Sure.
Were super informative, in my pedagogy for sure.
No, that's interesting. Cornelius, how about you? What's your origin story, and what would you say?
Similar to Kass, I think my story, in every story, I think context is important, and so I think it's important to note that I am a Liberian immigrant to the United States. So my parents moved to this country in the 80s when I was in elementary school. And we didn't just move to this country, we moved to Atlanta in the 1980s.
Gotcha.
And so emerging Black Atlanta is also a very important context.
Yeah.
And so to be from Liberia, one of 2 independent Black republics on the continent of Africa, and then to leave Liberia and land in Atlanta, Georgia in the 80s. So this is post Maynard Jackson, Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
Andrew Young, Atlanta, Georgia.
Yep.
Julian Bond, Atlanta, Georgia. So all of these like really powerful Black leaders.
Yeah.
I would say Atlanta itself was like my first teacher.
Wow.
Because I am learning to be an American in the streets of Atlanta, Georgia. So every Sunday school teacher I ever encountered, every neighbor who gave me candy, every friend who helped me to sleep my, corner of the porch, like that experience of being one of many is an experience that continues to challenge me and to speak to me. I think one of the hardest things to do in this political ecosystem, 2025, is to stay in community with folks. And even as professionals, right? The urge to be an individual, the drive to succeed kind of turns you into a lone, kind of warrior. But when I think about where I'm from, I am from Liberia, where people work in communities. I am from Atlanta, where people recognize the importance of the collective personal pronoun we.
Yeah.
So my first teacher would be Atlanta itself.
That's wonderful.
And there were so many families, so many of my neighbors, because again, early 1980s, Atlanta, you still had people who were working in the shadow of in the memory of Dr. King. You still have people who remember those days and those nights and that organizing. So much of my time was just spent in community, on porches and church basements, at rec centers. And so Atlanta was the teacher. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's interesting because you both have teachers in your lives, but like obviously they're not certified, credentialed teachers, like a grandmother in a city. Like that's so powerful and so unique. Like how does that affect the work that you do then with the teachers that you serve and the communities that you work with? Like those early experiences, how does that inform your work, if you don't mind?
For me, just like Atlanta was my teacher as a young person, New York City continues to be my teacher in my adulthood. I've lived here now for my entire adult life. And I think there's no greater honor on the planet for me than to serve the children of this great city.
Yeah.
To get up in the morning and to take the subway, and you're in a train car full of kids and you hear their conversations, you hear their worries, their excitements, their concerns.
Yeah.
And then to get to school and to watch people, eating their bacon, egg, and cheese, or to watch people discussing last night's Yankee scores. There's something about listening to the heartbeat, to the pulse, to the buzz of this city and allowing that to inform what we do every day. So when I hear a kid's excitement, that excitement finds its way into my teaching. When I understand a community struggle, that struggle finds its way into my pedagogy. When I experience, how parents care for their kids, that concern makes its way into every lesson.
Yeah.
And so I think it's still today, it's in the DNA.
Yeah.
I think too, when we think about something like a city, like Atlanta, New York City, or a group of people, or a grandmother informing who we are as educators, part of our work through the Minor Collective is really helping people consider, we all go to grad school to get teacher certification, et cetera. But what's interesting is that there's a ton of research that points out to people's learning around teaching, or the things they identify as most important, typically do not come from their experience in grad school or their traditional teacher preparation programs, right?
Yep. Right.
And so our work in school communities is really helping people, like we are grounded in a foundation of theoretical learning, right? Like we do need to understand how learning works, how reading works, et cetera. And we also need to tap into these really rich sources of familial knowledge, cultural knowledge, like place-based knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think people get most excited about partnering with us and vice versa when they really get to unpack and reveal not only who they are as an individual, but make these connections, just like we were doing before we started. Like we have this Atlanta, Ohio connection.
Right.
We've been in the game for a minute, but it's like the manifestation of a lot of different elements that create it's really beautiful elements of like that collective we that Cornelius was talking about, that comes from his childhood in Liberia. And that for me, like has grown in lots of different ways as well. And so just helping teachers and educators really like expanding how they think about teaching and learning beyond the scope of what they might find like in a textbook.
Yeah. It almost comes back to like when you said the scope of teaching and learning, that learning part sometimes, and I have to remind myself as a school administrator that like I'm still a learner.
Yeah.
And I can learn as much from a staff meeting as I can from a kid in the hallway. Just like you were saying, like in the subway, hearing kids, like their chatter and everything like that, like the importance of seeing oneself as a perpetual learner, I think is so important. So, and that goes to the next question, so the work with teachers, I know a lot of your work is about not just change, but sustainable change, right? Because it's nice to have change, but then sustainable change is clearly like the goal, right? Something that is sustainable for a long period of time. So how do teachers do the work of sustainable change in their classrooms, like on a daily basis? How do they do that work? What do you think?
I think that's the question we continue to grapple with.
Yeah.
So that will be, the question I chase for the rest of my life. But, one of the things that I am thinking about now in this professional moment, both Kass and I are 2 decades in. Sustainable change starts for me with 2 things.
Okay.
It starts with first a desire to really understand who your kids are and who your people are.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people understand what science is, they understand what math is, they understand what language arts is, they understand what, history is.
Yeah.
But are you striving to understand who your people are, who your kids are, who your community is, because you can't achieve anything if you're building a house on a foundation of just science or on a foundation of just math or on a foundation. So the disciplinary literacy, the disciplinary work is really, really important, but change doesn't happen just in the work. It happens as the work meets the community. And then the second thing that you need is, a real desire to deepen your craft. So how are you thinking about, the science, the math, the reading, the writing, and I think when those two things meet, any challenges that are on our path to creating change, you can weather those challenges because people are steadfast and firm in their content knowledge, and they're steadfast and firm in their community knowledge. And I think in far too many places, we have one or the other, where you have people who really, really, again, love the math or love the social studies,
right?
Always love the kids or don't always strive to understand the kids. And then sometimes you have people who are really, really connected to kids, but they haven't done their necessary homework on the math side of things or on the science side of things. And so I think that I know that in the communities where change is most measurable and sustainable, it is because people have invested the time in getting better at both. And so I think that's what sets us apart is that we don't engage in these kind of fly-by-night relationships with schools or communities.
Right.
We are really interested in what does it mean to invest the time so everybody sitting at this table becomes the best teacher of mathematics for the kids that we have here.
There you go.
Or so everybody sitting at this table becomes the best teacher of science or reading or whatever it is for the kids that we have here.
Cool. Dr. Ann, what are you going to say?
I wonder, you're reminding me of a phrase, Cornelius, but I'm going to also put it into a question because we love to give tangibles to our listeners. So the phrase I always think of is it's a student that shows up or a child shows up at your door, not a student, right? That's that intersection. So what, let's say I'm really good at content and you're mentoring me. What's the first thing, what's a good tangible strategy for me to take to start building relationships with my students? And then the reverse of that is I'm really great at the relationships. Help me get better with pushing the content. So that's it. We're going to do the 2-for theme here. So
I love it.
Tackle that one however you want.
Right. No pressure. Answer both of those.
So and go to Kass.
Oh, sure. I was just going to say, talking about tangible items, right? One of the practices that Cornelius and I name when we think about sustained change, sustainable change, this idea of micro practices, right? I think oftentimes when teachers go to professional learning, I've got these big sweeps, these big ideas with 100 different attachments, right? So one of the micro practices we consider when we're working on supporting welcoming and affirming environment, billions of classroom teachers, rethinking how you're thinking about data, right? So a lot of teachers, in my own research have named the over collection of data. They're spending a lot of time on, collecting data, third-party data, and how often is that really touching their classroom and their own instructional decision making. And so one of the things that Cornelius and I have designed together is one of your baseline assessments from the beginning of the year are these small mini student interviews. So every student in a classroom gets a quick 2 to 3 minute student interview. We have specific questions that we ask them. And that gives the teacher and the student a touchstone for I see you as a person. I'm not only interested in what you can do as a reader or as a mathematician, but I'm also interested in who you are and what you like.
Yeah.
And questions you have about life. And that small in gives us such a loaded information for how to activate prior knowledge, how to recontextualize our lesson plans. And that small practice throughout the year is such a beautiful way to establish this idea of relational learning, this connectedness that's absolutely necessary for trust-based communities. And it's not a super novel concept and it's not that hard, right? This is perhaps one of the simplistic ways and anybody can do it. It's very different than doing math professional development, right? Which requires a whole lot of in-depth work in terms of people's foundational understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to put it into bite-sized pieces, to directly answer the question, one of the things that I'm working with teachers on right now is I always say, if you're working on building relationships with a kid or any kid or a group of kids, start something today that you perpetuate tomorrow. So if you ask a kid about the Yankees today, follow up with tomorrow's score. Or if you ask a kid about their little brother today, follow up tomorrow and ask them how that little brother is doing. And so I always say, if you're struggling with building relationships with kids, start something today that you perpetuate tomorrow.
Yep.
And you keep it going. And so, or if I ask you about your favorite Pokemon today, I ask you if that Pokemon leveled up tomorrow. Or if I asked you about, and so start, and it doesn't have to be some big thing, literally a 20-second question. Oh, your favorite Pokemon Squirtle? Word. All right. And then tomorrow come back.
Yep.
But what about the plant Pokemon though? And then I come back the next day. And so you just start something today that you're going to build on every day. And what that does is that creates a small link between you and the kid where they start looking forward to those interactions.
Yep.
And then what's interesting is I give the same advice on the academic side. Start something today that you perpetuate tomorrow. So if a kid is really having a hard time, I don't know, what have I been working on recently? We've been factoring polynomials. So if a kid's having a really hard time factoring today, I perpetuate, I show back up tomorrow and I'm like, yo, yesterday I saw this thing that you were doing, and here's another pattern that you might want to try, or here's another approach that you might want to try. Then I show up the third day, hey, how'd that thing work out? And so I start something today that I follow up on. Now, here's what's interesting about both pieces of advice on both sides is I have to learn. So if a kid today tells me that their favorite Pokemon is Squirtle and I don't know what Squirtle is, I got to go home and learn.
Yep.
Right? Or if a kid is having trouble factoring today and I'm not sure how to clear that up for them, I have to go home and learn.
Yeah.
Right. And so both force the teacher into position of learner.
Yeah.
And again, it gets back to sustainability. That if the longer I stay in that position of learner, the stronger I become as a pedagogue.
Yeah. And I'm going to use the Pokemon vernacular, but I know that I'm unfamiliar with it all. But a lot of what you're saying is just like Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
They're out there.
Yeah.
You have to want to go find them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just like relationships, and it's just like connecting with kids. They want to be found.
Yeah.
But you've got to use your relationship feet. And like you said, go to them, ask the good questions. And I love the emphasis on following up, because it's easy to just have a random conversation here and there, but it's that intentionality of conversation and connectedness that I think makes that difference. That's awesome.
And what I love about it too is that there's, the very formal 2x10 strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, this is like 20x10, just 20 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So easy to do. It's just it's like the persevere and return, right? Remember, you got to come back and then, hey, Drew, and you said you were going to have pizza last night. How was it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love
so here's a question, right? So, because you said for sustainable change, a teacher and anyone really working in educational space, the desire to know the kids and your people, right? There has to be the desire to do that, and the desire to deepen your craft, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, hey, listen, I'm bought in, right? I'm bought in. I got it. I'm doing it. How do you help the teacher who's like, hey, I'm bought in, but my colleague next door, they're not bought in? How do they help other people also get bought in? Because we talk about the power of collective efficacy and getting everybody on board.
Yeah.
How do you help that teacher who needs to help the other teacher also get on board? Or is that I don't know, is that beyond rice and beans?
Oh, no.
It's funny. Well, here's a funny thing, Dr. Drew, and I'm going to just throw this out there.
Yeah, please.
I don't believe in buy-in.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
I don't believe in it. I think it's a sham. I think the greatest lie the devil ever told was that school change requires 100% buy-in. No powerful movement ever in the history of this country has happened with 100% buy-in.
Nice.
That most powerful movements are a couple of people. We were just talking about the American Civil Rights Movement. The American Civil Rights Movement, no disrespect to anybody, but really fundamentally was a couple of people in a church basement. Really. It was a lot of people really putting in the work.
Yep.
And then coming out of the church basement and then getting a few more people to put in the work.
Yeah.
And then getting a few more people to put in the work. But there are always going to be people who are oppositional. There are always going to be people who are, who have other agendas. And so I get my people.
I was going to say, I just, to maybe lighten up the anecdote.
Yeah, no.
Juan and I are often working together, and we have to strategize around this a lot, right? Because there is, people know, working in education right now is very heavy. Everybody's carrying around huge loads, right? And so Cornelius and I will work together, and we are always, trying to identify the people, like you say, who are about it. They are ready to go. And so we try to make that experience as positive as possible, give them shower them with support. And oftentimes what happens is, and I learned this from Cornelius, like, it's very contagious. Like, once folks witness other people, like, feeling positive vibes from like putting in the work, or like they'll see the return in a student's classroom, or they'll just like witness, the folks who are working together, like, laughing about like something that was like chaotic in that classroom. Like, they see that and they want, like, generally, like, people want to be a part of something that's like happened.
Yeah.
And that's generally been like where we have found success in getting kind of like the naysayers to leave in.
Yep.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Dr. Reeves always says is, I'm not asking for buy-in, I'm just asking for try-in.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is behavior before belief. Like, you're not going to believe just because Cornelius Minor came in and said that you should do this and it's going to work, this is going to work. What's going to happen is I just need you to try it so that you have success with it, and then you'll believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love what you're saying about the try, right? Like, I think that we as school leaders are people who are like facilitating the learning. We have to normalize like messing up. We have to normalize. It will be a little chaotic if this is something completely new that the students have never done before and that you're doing for the first time. I think somewhere along the way, I mean, we could talk about this forever, like, teachers feel like everything needs to be perfect, or they're going to get reprimanded if they try something and it doesn't go well.
Right.
And so I think our jobs as people with positions of power, like, one of our jobs is really like heavy on the like, this is a process. Like, this is going to be some trial and error. We're in this together. I support you. So long as everybody is like doing the work in an intentional and purposeful kind of way with some research to back it up.
Yeah.
I think more often than not, like, people have a really beautiful experience when they're collectively working towards something that's innovative and like really rooted in what students need and teachers are passionate about.
Yeah. And I really appreciate, Cornelius. I felt the passion in your voice about the buy-in stuff, and I appreciate that because I agree, and it was a good reminder to me as someone who works daily in the schoolhouse that I mean, I can think of specific classrooms and specific people who they're not necessarily antagonists in the story of school, but they're not necessarily protagonists either. And that doesn't mean that the story of the school has to stop just because we've got, characters in the story who aren't bought in. Which kind of goes to the next question, because you talked about working with teachers and how they can work on sustainable change. What advice do you have for, school leaders and defining that as like, school administrators, principals, assistant principals, et cetera, to ensure that students have equitable access, and that change is actually happening? So any advice for school leaders when they're doing their work on the daily basis?
I'll just say something quickly. I know you'll add on. I feel really strongly that school leaders need to be in classrooms as much as possible. I work with a group of in-service teachers, and when I was describing to them how some of the best school leaders I know go into classrooms, like, can demonstrate the lesson, support the teacher in demonstrating the math problem, whatever, their jaws dropped. They were so surprised. They didn't have that experience with the school leaders in their building. And I think that there's a lot of reasons why maybe that's not happening to the extent we would like. But I do feel like when everybody's on the same page around like what's going on in classrooms, what are the challenges, what are the things going well, like, we can only really talk about that if we're all like witnessing something similar, right?
Yeah.
Like, point one is like, we got to get on the same page about like being in that teaching and learning environment very frequently and often.
Yep.
And I sharpen my leadership craft and I'm sharpening it alongside an incredible community of educators. And so there's a couple of people I want to kind of shout out here, but
please, yeah.
I worked with, and we were all young teachers together. So I worked with an educator named Marcus Harden, Adam Burden, and Justin Henderson, and we were working together. And school was hard. We were young, we were ambitious. But, kids don't care about your career ambition. Like, kids go, they want to learn how to read, and they want to do really powerful math, and they want to like really explore the world of science.
Right.
And got to this point where we're sitting around eating dinner one evening, and Marcus said to me, he was like, you know what, we should be able to teach every class in the school building. And we just practiced that way. That's how we held each other accountable. Where in this little kind of game we'd play, we'd just be like, name a classroom, name a kid, name a subject.
Right.
Like, we should be prepared at all times to be able to do this. And what's funny is that has become my calling card as a leader, where even today, I spent a huge chunk of the morning lesson planning because I want this really cool social studies experience on Monday. And I'm not even on the social studies team. But like, I was like, I I think, especially if you're going to put on that white hat in the school building and call yourself a leader, I think it's really, really important that you should really be able to walk into any room with any group of kids and hold it down.
Yeah.
And the kind of, and I fall in love with the intellectual pursuit of it. And so even holding myself accountable this morning and being like, so what would it take for me to deliver an amazing social studies lesson on Monday? What do I need to study right now? What do I have to gather right now?
Yeah.
Like, how many angles do I have to study? Like, because we're doing ancient African civilizations in the beginning of the Middle Passage, the beginning of the Triangle Trade.
Yeah.
And so I was like, how deep do I need to go into Ghana so the kids can have a powerful experience? But like that questioning is what leaders need.
Yeah.
That even if you never get a chance to teach the lesson on Ghana, the kind of inquisitive stance required,
yes,
I think is really, really important, because if you hold that inquisitive stance as you engage in your leadership, so many magical things happen.
Yeah.
When people let that go, they're trying to keep the lights on, they're trying to keep the bills paid, they're trying to make sure, everything in the school runs, but we're educators first and foremost.
Right. Yeah. And that's a great reminder too. I literally writing down the word questions and just circling it and circling and circling it.
Yes.
Asking great questions
Yeah.
will lead to good answers. But if we get lazy and complacent and stop asking good questions, then how can we bemoan our circumstance that as a leader you're always seen as just the disciplinarian or just the person who does checklists and to-do lists? But man, that's a great reminder. That's awesome. That's awesome.
We shared a principal, and she would come to department meetings and she knew the curriculum as well. And that always impressed me, that she would come and she'd be like, well, can we do it this way? Because when I read the curriculum or when I try to teach it, it comes out like this. And just being able to have that credibility as a leader to be like, when I try to teach it, it comes out like this. Not 10 years ago when I taught it, not
right.
But like when I tried it. And so that being able to speak in present tense about your craft means something.
That's cool. And teachers and educational leaders need to be not afraid to step into a classroom and share some of that. I enjoy going into a classroom because I was a language arts teacher. So now I'm speaking of the former. So now I feel like I'm being contrary to my own efforts. But, language is such a universal connector. And so I feel like, I can go into any class, and if there's a word on the board, a vocab word in science, social studies, math, whatever it is, like being able to find that hook and that connection is something that, I agree that every educational leader needs to be able to do, to go in unafraid, lead with your feet, and like have those cool moments. Oh my gosh. All right. I mean, that's kind of like a superpower, right?
Yeah.
So that goes to the next question. So you got to brag on yourself a little bit. So what superpowers do you have that make your work go so well? Because it's a combo effort too. So it's kind of like, what are your combination superpowers? How do they even, complement each other? That you could go that way too.
And I want to recharacterize this question a little bit.
Ooh,
because I think the word superpower is dangerous. In that people start to think that they need to be some huge thing in order to be effective.
Yes.
And I think the most effective people in classrooms lead with their full humanity. And so it's not a superpower as much as it's a habit. And I think I can't always see myself, but I can see Kass really clearly. and like Kass is like, I think one of Kass's most like sterling habits is that she cannot let a kid not learn. She cannot let another educator not learn. Like, she sees to it, it is her business that everybody in the vicinity is a learner. Like, she won't let it go.
Got it.
Like, and so we'll be in the room together sometimes, and like she'll be like, that person doesn't understand. And I'm like, but everybody else does. But she won't let she won't let go. She won't let it go. But it's a habit, and it's such an omnipresent habit that it moves whole communities. And so it looks like a superpower. And so a lot of people might say, oh, but I don't like to use that term because it's what she does every day. It's habits.
Well, I think it's really like,
that's really cool.
It's this belief. This is like not novel, but not so often enacted. This idea, there's a saying called "There's more power in the people than the people in power." What I mean by that is, whether it be teacher and like 12 students all with an IEP, or like, maybe it's like a group of superintendents with a ton of principals. Like, we all have capacity and contributions to make, right? But not everybody is conditioned to believe that.
Yeah.
And so part of our work to, as far as me and Cornelius together is like, I'm really good. Like the thing that helps our work go is like, I'm really good at saying like very big picture. And then as educators, as a people who work in the business of teaching and learning, we have to be able to figure out what is the journey, what are the stops along big picture, right?
Yep.
And for us, I am not always like, I don't always know like the delivery style I need to do that in. Like I can be really nerdy, I can be kind of bookish, I could be like, well, let me tell you the research, like not everybody like bites into that. But I think like by knowing like what my strengths are and by Cornelius knowing what his strengths are, and now we have, this trust together. And yes, we're married now, have been for a long time, but we met as teachers who shared the same students, who worked in the same community.
Oh, wow.
This sort of like seed has really been around for a very long time. And it's like a productive game of basketball, right? Like if you're a shooter, you're tired, your arm's gonna get like wrenched out or broken like before too long. But like we know when to pass the ball.
Yeah.
And I know when to draw the plays. And he knows when to, keep on shooting the buckets. And so there's a level of trust that you have to have in whomever you're working with. And you have to really understand like what do you bring to the table and be willing to let go when you're like, you know what, this is more suited for you.
Yeah. And that's a good reminder to every teacher and educator out there that it's not work that is done alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, nor should it be, ever.
And unfortunately, this goes to your field, sometimes master schedules are built that perpetuate the siloistic, is that a word?
Well,
we just made I just did it. Hey, there you go. The siloistic way of educating, that people get in their little, because there's no time for them to collaborate and connect, so that's a good reminder about that too. Jeez, so thank you for troubling the question too, because that is a good reminder that it's about, well, now I'm afraid to say it, but super habits instead of superpowers.
Super habits.
Yeah.
I love it.
Super habits. Okay,
really
so
kid-facing, learning-friendly nomenclature. I love it.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm afraid to ask the other question of the other side of the coin, but do you have a kryptonite? Is there anything that...
Oh, yeah.
You just named it, Dr. Drew.
I think we already found her kryptonite, and that's what people don't get it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was going to say the isolating piece, I think, is the kryptonite.
Yeah.
Like when there's nobody to bounce ideas off of, when you feel alone and like, oh my God, I'm just going to get this done. Or when you have the capacity to do all of the work on your own, you don't check in with other people.
Yeah.
I think it's in those spaces where we find ourselves in, the most precarious kinds of situations. And I know that, has been a big challenge for both me and Cornelius.
Yeah, I think I am.
Yeah.
I have been in the most professional peril when I go it alone. Like when I think that I got it by myself and I don't check in with anybody. And so I am constantly having to remind myself to be in community with others, even if I think I got it.
Yeah.
And not just trouble that, because you're rewarded in our culture of education. You are rewarded for being able to do a lot alone very quickly.
Yeah.
And so I think, we have to keep complicating that as a people who are, shaping our educational futures. It's not always best to do things quickly. It's not always best to be the first one done. Like, it's not always best to be the guy who can do it alone.
Right.
There's power in being together. There's power in questioning each other. It's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, it is.
There's a reason why that effect size is so high for collective efficacy, right?
Exactly.
Over and over and over again.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think of it in astronomy ways. Like, don't talk about superstars. Let's talk about constellational change. Right? Like, let's make some linkages. So, because bright stars, you might have a bright star in your school, but that person may burn out. That person may leave. So how do you make constellational change instead of like a superstar? Like, oh yes, this one person.
And I'm going to add one more astronomical term, Dr. Drew.
Yes.
This direction. So there's a term I learned on a field trip to a planetarium called an asterism. Do you know this word?
No, but it sounds wonderful.
Okay. So an asterism is a collection of stars that aren't necessarily in a constellational shape.
Okay.
Right? And so I think oftentimes when we're working towards what is named efficacy, we're aiming for a specific programmatic outcome, where I think we are now in 2025 and our world of learning is evolving so quickly.
Yeah.
when we work towards something we have not yet experienced ourselves in school, something that maybe we don't have the shape for yet.
Yeah.
I think there's so much power in that. And that's a really exciting thing to work towards. And I think it's tricky because we are, there was no AI even 5 years ago in the ways that it is now.
Right.
And so thinking about what that means together and, collecting these stars in a shape that we've not yet seen is really fun. Cornelius and I thrive off that work. Not everybody's always game for it, I will admit, but it's really exciting endeavor.
Yeah, but just like the idea that we get to participate in the kind of learning that prepares us for things that we don't know or can't see yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really exciting. Yeah.
And you mentioned a very dangerous F word. That is obviously it's palpable in your work, and that's fun.
Oh,
we're doing this very heady work, this very driven work, that it has a massive gravity to it. But if you're not having fun, then shoot.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I think that's what keeps me in it. I work in middle schools in New York City. There is nobody more fun on this planet.
That is true.
Than New York City teenagers. And so it's just if you're not smiling or laughing or having a good time, why are we here? Because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, but
and middle school teachers are so fun. I just talked to our kids teacher and his science teacher. They examined lice under the microscope for their first few days of school.
Yep.
And but also it's so exciting for kids to see these critters up close. They're just so engaging and gross.
Yep.
It's just there's no other place like middle school.
Yeah.
There you go. You know what? Thank you, because that's my whole heart. That's my life. Because I've taught high school. I also worked in an elementary school, but middle school, all the cheese isn't on the cracker, but I love it. That's where that world makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. You know what else makes sense to me is that this has been such a delightful conversation. Oh my gosh. Kass, Cornelius, thank you for inspiring us and our listening audience here on the Fearless Schools podcast and bringing your special brand of educational energy to today's sessions. It was just popping. It was popping through. Really, honestly, our listeners, they were looking for a room in the house of learning with all the windows open to let in the uplifting breeze of inspiration, and you did it. You brought them in, you sat right down and said, hey, stay a while. So thank you so much. From coffee to rice and beans to then some. Goodness gracious. Thank you. Fearless Schools podcast listeners, you did it. You took time out of your listening lives to check out another Fearless Schools podcast brought to you by Creative Leadership Solutions. And you got to be proud of yourself. Pat yourself on the back. Go down the street. Tell everybody about it. Go to www.creativeleadership.net and go see the Minor Collective as well. They got a website that's great as well. Tells you all about all their great work. Subscribe to us. Subscribe to them. Share this podcast to everyone you know, colleagues, pals, local thought leaders, postal carriers, friends, frenemies, whoever, whenever. Dr. Drew Tomlin, host of your Fearless Schools podcast, wishing you well and saying, stay fearless on the bright road ahead. Thanks again, Kass. Thank you again, Cornelius. Thank you, Dr. Ann.
Thank you.
Hey.